All right. Good morning, Chevra. Like we said, it's a long weekend. I know people are already up and away and doing whatever. And over here, actually, it's crazy in our house. We have visitors and guests and whatever. But certain things you always carve out time for. So we'll send it out to those who weren't able to, and they can watch it at their own time. So while we entitle this something along the lines of what's the most important battle we have now, I actually want to start with just something on a side that I've been having a conversation with a bunch of people. Last time this week, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, there were still nuclear reactors in across Iran and all the Fordow that everyone was speaking about. And I just want to stop for 1 second and be makir to recognize to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God, like after 40 years of us living under that existential threat, the nature of the game has drastically changed. But what was interesting is I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine. We were sitting outside in Yorkville, and he was saying, "Yeah, it's pretty amazing that Israel finally did that." And I said, "Without a doubt, there's tremendous gratitude that's given to the brave soldiers, to the planning, to everybody. It's quite unbelievable when you think about that." But I said, one always has to take a step back and realize how did this how all unfold. And again, we're not going to go into the question of bad things and good people right now. And obviously, there's no anyone who gives an answer to why the individuals who have suffered in and since October 7th have absolutely no legitimacy. They don't know the reasons of each and every person. But I said, let's understand for a second that it would have been impossible for Israel to have done what it did if it wasn't for what happened at that moment. And he's like, why? We always had the technology of what's going on. They just decided now's the time. And I said, let's understand. If it would have happened, what took place in Iran, if it would have happened in the year 2022, and that's when we saw the existential threat that was facing us at that point in time, right? Before, the world changed for the Jewish people as a result of October 7th. I said, what would have been the first thing that would have happened after we went in and bombed Iran? Right? So without a doubt, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but without a doubt, what would have happened was Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, Egypt, and add your favorite, neighbor that we have over there, our good, friends in the region. In a second, Iran would have just been like, guys, go get them. And we would have been under a 7, 8 front battle in the midst of everything when they were at their strongest height, all of the proxies. Meaning, as a result of what happened over the past couple of years, where systematically, one by one, they got weakened or completely demolished. From Hamas then up to Hezbollah to Syria, if you look at the landscape of everything that happened, and the result of the fact that right now at this time, Israel's like, you know what, they're getting really close, we got to do something. They were able to execute that because everything that happened prior to that set it up where it could be actually executed. And I said, I remember seeing an article, and I wrote down the phrase in one of the papers saying Israel was able to go ahead and attack because, and this was the quote, they said the stars aligned. The stars just aligned. And because they aligned, Israel was able to do that. There's no such thing as stars aligning. There's always a hand behind the scene of orchestrating everything that's there. And one of the greatest aspects of miracles that happen is not just when we sit there and see something specific, like let's say the Soroka, hospital miracle of how one day earlier there would have been, if not 100 or more people that were just not. I don't even want to think. We all know what could have happened if there it was a day off. So it wasn't just that sometimes the stars align the day of, but sometimes the stars align, you have to take a big step back and say, wow, let's look at how things have unfolded over years. That happens to be the whole story of Purim. The whole story of Purim, which looks so miraculous, where we don't see the name of God mentioned once. When we take a step back each year on Purim and realize what had to happen in order for Esther to be able to get Haman's entire ruse, which Haman, as we know, was Persia, which is Iran. How did Haman become undone? It looks like, wow, it was a simple miracle. It was a miracle that took years in the planning for it to happen. Yes, we sent in our Mossad undercover agent in that situation, which was Esther, but how did Esther even get in there? And how did Achashverosh say, you know what, Mordechai's not my guy, and now all of a sudden Mordechai is my guy? And how did Haman go from being on the highest level to all of a sudden within one night's dream drop slowly, quickly? It wasn't just because at that moment it happened, it's because there were the alignment of stars, what we like to call as God's hand behind everything. And therefore, it's incumbent upon us, I believe, to realize that we're living in times, again, of miracles always, and to give a little bit of Shevach Hanodah and, appreciation to what we're witnessing in our days. So that's not our topic, but I feel that since we haven't met since last week before, Trump decided to pull the trigger and go in and do everything that happened, I think a lot's changed in the world and it would be wrong of us in this setting not to acknowledge that. And therefore, I want to focus on, as a sort of a pivot, what I think I entitled, What's the Biggest Battle That the Jews Face, specifically starting today. So today happens to be Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of a new month. And every month has its own definition and start of what's important during that month, what's celebrated or honored during that month, and that defines the nature of the month. So this month is today is the first day of the month of Tammuz. Tammuz has one special day in it. It's called Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz. It happens to be a fast day, a minor fast day, but an important fast day. And the fast day commemorates the fact that the beginning of the destruction of Israel took place. So the Romans were sitting there and encircling the walls to Jerusalem. There was a siege on it, and it was just a matter of time till they overtook it and eventually destroyed the temple, which did actually happen on Tisha B'Av twice. Two temples were destroyed during that time. And when it comes to things that happen in the world to the Jewish people, we never say it happens because, the Romans were mightier than our Israeli army. Right? The reality is, if God's able to do miracles, split seas, and overcome tremendous obstacles of the David versus Goliath in every generation, when David doesn't beat Goliath, it doesn't mean it's because, I guess, our strategy wasn't good enough. That's not the way we interpret Jewish history. The way we interpret Jewish history is, for some reason, God didn't empower the David to beat the Goliath in this situation, because we get comfortable on the fact that we always beat the odds. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think many people, myself very much included, when one of the ballistic missiles hit Israel, I was actually taken for a loop. I'm like, what do you mean? That just doesn't happen in Israel. Like, we've got the Iron Dome and all the other, toys that we have. We don't get hit. We sit there and knock them out of the sky, and that's all we do. And when the first one hit and actually caused damage and took some lives, it was like shocking. Like, how is that possible? If you take a step back and you say, wait, what are the chances that ballistic missiles will be lobbed at a tiny country, and the imagery that was given was the size of New Jersey versus twice the size of Texas and times 10 of population, right? And what are the chances that not one will go through? That's not the norm. That's the miracle. Right? And therefore, we have to say we're merit miracles to happen to the Jewish people. We put in our effort. It happens through teva, through nature, but it's miraculous. Then when it doesn't happen, the Jewish history doesn't view it as, oh, when it doesn't happen, it must be that we didn't do a good enough job. It's for some reason we didn't merit somehow this miracle, because everything about the Jewish history, about the Jewish people, is miraculous. And therefore, I want to share with you, as we're about to enter into this time period of what's called the 3 weeks, which commemorates the destruction of the temples, which the Talmud asks not who destroyed it, but rather, how could it be that God let them? Why didn't we deserve to overcome? The Talmud says a few things that are very important, very shocking, and I think very relevant in our day and age. So if I can take it to if I can figure out how to do this, here we go. I think I can. 1, 2, 3. Great. So Talmud says something quite quite interesting. It starts off with as follows: as we might have mentioned, just to recap and make sure we're all on the same page, there were two temples that we had in Jerusalem, and we always pray like that the third one, the final one, gets rebuilt and brings in that messianic era. So the Talmud asks, why was it destroyed? Now, it doesn't say it was destroyed because of the Romans or the Babylonians. It says, what was the reason why we didn't deserve to have the temple anymore? View it as the following image. People are living in the house, like the temple is God's house, right? And we go to visit him and take, we go up there on 3 times at least a year over the holidays, just like, we have our mishpacha come to us for Pesach and for Sukkot maybe and for the holidays. So too, we'd go up to the temple, and then God's like, that's it. There's no more temple. No one's invited here. I'm moving out. So it says, why did that happen? So the Talmud says, well, the first one, due to what reason was the first temple destroyed? So it says, well, it was destroyed due to the fact that there were 3 matters that existed in the first temple, right? It means this is how Jews were behaving. There was idol worship, like rampant idol worship during the first temple period, right? There was forbidden sexual relations. There was one sibling, another sibling, everything, whatever. And there was bloodshed and there was murder. It says, okay, if we had to take a step back and say, wow, This is what was happening during that time period. Idol worship, promiscuity, bloodshed. You and I would be like, okay, like I get it. God's like, you know what? Like I didn't give you Israel and the temple to be able to serve other gods, to kill people, and to just be all about hedonistic pleasure. Like it's not the vision that I had for what our people were supposed to be like. I'm closing up shop. You guys are out until you fix up your game. And that's what happens. And that's what the Talmud explains is the reason for that. And as we might know, the temple is rebuilt 70 years later, right? So we make it back. We take the lesson. We're like, okay, guys, let's clean up our act a little bit. And all of a sudden we come back to Israel. And it's fantastic. But then we have a second destruction. And the Talmud says, well, what was the second destruction about? Why did that one take place? And it says something that's so well known, but so shocking if you stop on it. It says as follows. I got to move my bar over here. It says, however, during the Second Temple period, where people were engaged in Torah study, observance of mitzvahs, acts of kindness, so you had Torah, you had mitzvahs, you had chesed, we were great, right? We were doing it all. And they did not perform the sinful acts that were performed in the first temple. All that stuff from the first temple that was going on, none of that was around. So then, hey, like, why'd the Second Temple destruction come along? What was that all about? So it says as follows. It was destroyed due to the fact there was wanton hatred. In Hebrew, it's called sinas chinam, baseless hatred. There was just hatred during that period. It means Jew versus Jew, one did not like the other. They hated each other. They just couldn't get along. And God's like, if you guys can't get along, I don't want you here. And then the Talmud says, hold on, let's draw the connection point of what that means. It means that what you're telling us, Jewish people, is that this comes to teach you that baseless hatred, Jew versus Jew, one Jew hating another Jew, is equivalent to the three severe transgressions of idol worship, sexualism, and bloodshed. Right? Those are called in Hebrew the three ones that a person is in English, is supposed to give their life up for. Right? That a person says, you want me to kill somebody else? I'd rather you take my life than me killing somebody else. You want me to bow down to that God and to convert? Right? Throughout history, when there were Jews in the Crusades, the reason why they were killed isn't because they were Jews. It's because they didn't agree to go ahead and say, fine, we'll take your guy and we'll drop our guy. Even if they would have just said it, they said, we're not backing down. So those are massive things. And that destroyed the first temple. And the second temple, it says, none of that was happening. It was all good. But Jews just didn't get along. They hated each other. They judged each other. They spoke negatively about each other. And the Talmud therefore says, if the first temple was destroyed because of that, and the second temple was destroyed of this, well, then it comes to teach us that those two things in God's eyes and in Jewish history are equal, which is a crazy concept, right? Furthermore, right, so what does that have to do with you and I, right? Where do we land in this game? So the Talmud in Yerushalmi, assuming there we go, says something that we say we have to understand what that means, that the temple was destroyed. So the Talmud Yerushalmi says as follows: Kol dor she'eno nivna biyamav malin alav ki'ilu hu hechrivu. See, it says in every generation that the Beit HaMikdash, that the temple is not rebuilt, it's as if in that generation, typo, it was destroyed. What does that mean? Let's take it off of our share. What that's saying is something extremely powerful. Right? When we say the temple was destroyed 2,000 years ago because of baseless hatred, Jews just couldn't really love each other for just who they are, despite their apparent differences. That doesn't mean the temple was destroyed 2,000 years ago. It means if the temple was in Jerusalem yesterday, God would have said, I'm taking it away today. Why? Because that problem is still prevalent to this very day. And it's not just that something in history happened and we haven't got the contractors together to say, hey, let's build it. Come on. Jews have lots of contractors. We can figure it out, right? We're in Toronto. Like, we've got real estate is insane, the amount of people we have in that. We can't figure out how to build a temple. No, you don't understand. It's not about being able to put the bricks and mortars. It's about taking away the reason. Just like the destruction wasn't because of who knocked down the temple bricks and mortar. It was because of the reason why it took place was because Jews couldn't get along. So too in every generation that it's not rebuilt, it's not because we haven't made it a priority to say, how do we make this work? It's because us as Jews, as brothers and sisters, as a mishpacha, haven't figured out how to get along yet. And until that happens, the temple will not be rebuilt. I think we all know, and it's been said, so many times that October 6th, the challenges were the fact that, right, with everything happening in Israel, the reform that was there and the protests and the different sides during this time period, the different opinions and the difficulties, and as things always get a little bit better from the existential threat from the outside, the level of existential threat from the inner civil war becomes stronger. And in many ways, what this Talmud is teaching us in this time period, I believe in a very deep way, is that God says, listen, and we've seen this, if you guys get together, trust me, the outside enemies, you can handle that. If you're all working together, you can do that. I'll make sure David can beat Goliath. That's a piece of cake. That's easy. The one thing I can't solve for you is you're going to have Jewish people that are very, very different, have very different opinions and understand things on a different level. But you're going to have to find a way, despite their differences, to love them like family. You don't always have, when it comes to family, you don't always like your family, but you always have to love them. It means like there's certain things that they might be doing or whatever, which just, you just don't agree with. Okay, fine. So you're different. You have different approaches, but does that mean you can't love your fellow neighbor like yourself? Right? And all of destruction of the Jewish people is hinged on that one area. I thought about that in a very powerful way. That I think it was Monday night, I was at an event. It was a beautiful, parlor meeting to raise money for Eretz Yisrael, for Israel, for with the destruction that's happening there, and to try to rebuild. There was another asifa, another gathering of individuals. They were there because they're trying to support Jewish learning and Torah. Two very different groups. And very often, those two different groups see things very differently in terms of what they value, what they appreciate, where they put their money. And very often, there's a lot of tension and judgment on all sides. And it's easy to judge people that are different or have different values. It's very simple. Sinas Chinam, if it was that easy to fix, we would have fixed it 5 days afterwards and said, let's go home. But I had this machshava, this thought, as I left where I was speaking at this, parlor meeting, and I sent it to a few of my chaverim, a few of my friends who have a bit of a, cynical edge to them, out of all jokingness, but everybody's sort of poking from different sides. And I said, you know what? If I was a Shem right now, God, looking down on Toronto at this moment, at the same time at let's say 8:30, and I said, wow, look at this. You have these people that care about Israel in this way and Jewish identity in this way. You have these people care about Israel in this way and Jewish identity. One might call it Eretz Yisrael, one might call it Medinat Yisrael. One might call it Jewish identity, one might call it Torah and mitzvahs. But everybody's sitting there and coming together saying, how do we sit there and come together as a Jewish people to strengthen the Jewish people, even though we know we're so different, just like the tribes were different. Yisachar and Zvulun, one was a worker and one was a learner. Somehow they made it work, even though they were so different. Right? We're not going to go ahead and get rid of the fact that there are differences, but what we have to get rid of the fact is it's not a reason to not like each other, but rather to find the commonality. And the commonality is we're all part of this beautiful family, this tribe called Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. And I believe that right now the avoda, as we're going, the work that we have as we're entering into the month of Tammuz, the month which starts to talk about the destruction, is to tell us, wait, if we really want to focus on how we rebuild, then I've got to find a way to just love the other Jew. One of the ways, and we'll end with this, there's a chabur that I give on Thursday nights, and we're just starting to study this beautiful sefer on this chapter of Avas Yisrael, loving a Jew. He says the first thing you have to do is go straight to their soul. Don't start judging a Jew by their external. See through everything on the outside and realize that deep down inside, they've got this burning, beautiful, pure soul that's inside of them. And over life, things happen. People go in different directions, different decisions. We live today in a day and age of where we call things like trauma and whatever. And we understand, wait, a person might do certain things or have certain whatever, but because of things they experience, who knows how a person got to where they got to? Just like, for example, if a person saw someone who was like, I don't know, pillaging through garbage and like eating and looking all whatever and this thing, you'd be judging them like, how could they do this? And then all of a sudden, if I said, you know what, by the way, that person was like thrown out of their house at the age of 2 and they had to fend for themselves for always, and like everything that always they tried to do just miserably failed. They have no choice and they're just trying to survive in a world that's been so unkind to them. It turns from a sense of judgment of this individual to like immense compassion and sympathy and love for the fact that you feel like, wow, this person had such a tough time to get there. Everybody's got their trimmings and has their different upbringings. But if you go to the soul of the person, that neshama, that all comes from the same place, when God breathed that first soul into Adam and said, listen, here you go. And it's going to be different because Adam, you're going to have a couple kids and they're going to be really different. And they're going to go on. Everyone's going to have their challenges. And some will do things right. Some will get things wrong. But you know what? You got to always love them for the soul that they are. If we're able to do that, I believe, That's the superpower for David always beating Goliath, and for us to ultimately get to the end where we bring everyone together under that understanding that once we can see that about ourselves, the final promise to Avram is "V'nivrechu b'cha kol mishpat adama," through you the entire world will be blessed with that as well. So, Chevra, my friends, brothers, sisters, family, I believe that's the avoda, that's the work that we have as we start this month to figure out and really embrace, how do I look at someone and rather than think about why they're different, I don't like them, I judge them, how can I get past all of that to say, I just love you because you're my brother, you're my sister, and we'll work through the rest of that. However, wishing everyone a good Shabbos, a great long weekend, lots of time to spend with our families. So, to put that into work, sometimes the ones who cause us the most, annoyance are the ones that are closest to us. And please God, if we're Zocha, if we merit to fix this up, then we're all going home very soon. Have a great Shabbos. Great to see you. And we'll see you next week, my friends.